The story of Russia and Ukraine is not just a recent headline. It is a tale that stretches back centuries, layered with culture, politics, and human emotion. To understand why these two nations found themselves at war, we need to step back and see the broader picture, the historical threads that have woven tension, pride, and conflicting ambitions into the fabric of Eastern Europe. Imagine a land where the boundaries of empires have shifted again and again, where identities have been challenged and redefined, and where every action echoes the memory of a past that is impossible to forget. The conflict that erupted may seem sudden on the evening news, but it is the result of decades of political maneuvering, social change, and historical narratives clashing in ways that could no longer be contained. Ukraine, a country of vast plains, rivers, and rich agricultural land, has long been a crossroads between East and West. Its history is inseparable from the rise and fall of empires, from the grand cities of Kiev and Lviv to the contested regions in the East and South. For centuries, Ukraine existed under various rulers, from the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth to the Russian Empire, each leaving marks on the language, culture, and political structure of the nation. When the Soviet Union formed, Ukraine became one of its largest republics, contributing significant resources, manpower, and cultural influence. Yet even within this union, tensions simmered beneath the surface. National identity, suppressed language, and regional autonomy were delicate subjects, quietly shaping a society that would later assert itself on the global stage. Russia, on the other hand, carries the legacy of the Tsars, the Orthodox Church, and the vast expansionist ambitions that defined much of Eastern Europe and Asia. Its political strategy has long emphasized securing borders, influencing neighboring states, and maintaining spheres of influence. To Russia, Ukraine is not just a neighbor. It is historically and culturally intertwined, representing both strategic security and symbolic significance. The question of sovereignty, alliance, and regional alignment has been central to Russia's foreign policy, particularly after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when newly independent states like Ukraine began charting their own path toward democracy, market reforms, and closer relations with Western institutions. The seeds of modern conflict were sown in political decisions and social movements in the early 21st century. Ukraine's attempts to strengthen ties with the European Union, coupled with internal divisions between pro-Western and pro-Russian regions, created a precarious balance. Economic pressures, energy dependencies, and political protests, most notably the Euromaidan movement, exposed deep divisions within Ukraine and tested Russia's willingness to influence its neighbor's trajectory. For many Ukrainians, the desire for self-determination clashed with historical and strategic pressures imposed by Russia, making compromise difficult and fostering a climate ripe for confrontation. Geography also played a decisive role in shaping this conflict. The Crimean Peninsula, the Donbas region, and other strategic locations have long been considered vital to military, economic, and cultural interests. Control over ports, industrial regions, and transport corridors is not merely tactical. It carries immense symbolic weight. Both nations see these areas as integral to national identity, sovereignty, and security. When disputes escalated over Crimea and Eastern territories, the world witnessed how geography could amplify historical grievances into contemporary crises, leading to direct military engagements that drew global attention. International dynamics further intensified the situation. NATO's expansion, European Union integration efforts, and global diplomatic pressures influenced decision-making on both sides. While Ukraine sought security guarantees and economic partnerships, Russia viewed such moves as encroachments into its sphere of influence, prompting actions intended to assert dominance and protect perceived national interests. The interplay of diplomacy, economic sanctions, military strategy, and international media coverage created a complex matrix in which every move carried immediate consequences, both domestically and abroad. The human dimension cannot be overlooked. Millions of ordinary citizens, families, students, workers, experienced uncertainty, fear, and disruption. Cities and towns became more than locations on a map. They were places of identity, heritage, and daily life, suddenly at risk. The stories of resilience, adaptation, and courage amidst conflict highlight that behind every historical analysis, every political maneuver, there are individuals whose lives are directly shaped by these events. Understanding their experiences is essential to grasping the emotional and psychological weight behind the headlines. The escalation that eventually led to open conflict was not sudden but the result of accumulating tensions, both political and cultural. Ukraine's 2014 revolution, widely known as the Euromaidan protests, was a turning point. Citizens rallied in the capital, demanding greater alignment with Europe and the European Union, rejecting perceived corruption and undue influence from Moscow. This movement reflected not only political dissatisfaction but also a broader desire for independence, national pride, and self-determination. For Russia, these events were interpreted as a challenge to its influence in a region it has historically considered vital to its security and identity. The subsequent annexation of Crimea by Russia in March 2014 marked a decisive moment, signaling that disagreements over borders and political alignment were no longer just theoretical, they could be enforced by force. Crimea has long been a region of strategic importance. Its location on the Black Sea provides critical access to naval routes and military positioning, while its symbolic significance resonates deeply within Russian history and culture. The annexation was not merely a territorial move. It carried a message that Russia was determined to protect what it sees as its historic sphere of influence. Internationally, the event drew widespread condemnation and sanctions, yet it also demonstrated the complex interplay between national security concerns, historical memory, and modern geopolitical strategy. Crimea became a flashpoint, illustrating how geography and history intertwine to shape present-day conflicts. Simultaneously, the Donbas region in eastern Ukraine became a center of tension. Comprising Donetsk and Luhansk, the area has a significant population with cultural and linguistic ties to Russia. Political disagreements, economic disparities, and local grievances created fertile ground for unrest. Armed groups and separatist movements emerged, escalating into armed confrontations that drew both domestic and international attention. While the Ukrainian government sought to reassert control, Russia provided support to separatist forces, viewing the region as a buffer and a strategic point of influence. The conflict in Donbas reflects how local identities and historical affiliations can magnify larger geopolitical struggles, creating situations where diplomacy becomes challenging and military options are prioritized. The international context further complicated the crisis. NATO's presence in Eastern Europe, Western economic partnerships, and broader global alliances created a situation where every action was magnified. Russia perceived NATO's expansion eastward as a direct threat, raising concerns about encirclement and security vulnerabilities. Ukraine, meanwhile, sought protection and support from Western institutions, aiming to strengthen its sovereignty and economic stability. This clash of perspectives contributed to a stalemate in diplomatic efforts, with each side interpreting the other's moves as provocations or existential threats. The resulting tension created conditions in which misunderstandings, miscalculations, and historical resentments could escalate into open confrontation. Economics played a critical role as well. Ukraine's dependence on energy supplies, trade routes, and economic partnerships with both Russia and the West created vulnerabilities. Natural gas pipelines, industrial regions, and agricultural exports became bargaining tools and points of leverage. Russia, aiming to maintain influence, used economic pressure strategically, while Ukraine worked to diversify its trade and energy connections to strengthen independence. Economic interdependence, which might have provided opportunities for compromise, instead became another arena for conflict, where strategic advantage often outweighed cooperative solutions. The war also cannot be understood without considering the role of media, narratives, and public perception. Both domestic populations in Russia and Ukraine, as well as the international community, were influenced by carefully crafted narratives about identity, security, and morality. Propaganda, historical storytelling, and social media shaped perceptions, reinforcing nationalistic sentiments and shaping public opinion. These narratives heightened emotional stakes, making political compromise less likely and adding psychological pressure to leaders and citizens alike. Understanding this dimension is key to appreciating how conflicts escalate beyond simple territorial disputes. At the human level, the consequences of this struggle are profound. Millions of civilians face displacement, insecurity, and the emotional toll of living in contested territories. Families are torn apart, children grow up amidst uncertainty, and communities experience trauma that will linger long after active conflict ends. Human resilience and adaptation are remarkable, yet the psychological weight of war cannot be underestimated. Stories of courage, solidarity, and everyday heroism emerge amidst destruction, reminding viewers that behind every geopolitical analysis lie real lives, hopes, and struggles. By 2014, the annexation of Crimea and the rising tensions in Donbas had set the stage for a complex conflict that combined historical grievances, national pride, and strategic interests. Ukraine, a young democracy with ambitions of closer ties to Europe, faced internal divisions and external pressures that tested the strength of its institutions. In the West, populations tended to support European integration and democratic reforms, while in the East, cultural, linguistic, and economic ties to Russia remained strong. These divisions created a political landscape where compromise was increasingly difficult, and where local grievances could escalate into broader national crises. Russia's strategy during this period was informed not only by territorial interests but by historical narratives. Leaders emphasized shared history, cultural connections, and the perceived need to protect Russian-speaking populations. Crimea, as the home of the Black Sea Fleet and a historically symbolic territory, became the focal point of these policies. By asserting control over Crimea, Russia sent a message about the importance of protecting what it considers its rightful sphere of influence. Meanwhile, support for separatist movements in Donbas was intended to create leverage, ensuring that Ukraine could not fully align with Western institutions without facing internal instability. Diplomacy during this period was cautious but tense. International actors, including the European Union, the United States, and the United Nations, attempted to mediate, proposing agreements, ceasefires, and frameworks for resolution. Some progress was made in the early stages, but underlying mistrust, differing interpretations of agreements, and continued skirmishes on the ground prevented lasting peace. The Minsk agreements, intended to establish a ceasefire and outline political solutions, were repeatedly tested, revealing the difficulty of reconciling national ambitions with regional realities. Energy and economics remained central to the conflict. Ukraine relies heavily on natural gas transported from Russia, and disputes over pricing and transit have historically been used as tools of influence. Industrial regions in the east, including coal and steel production centers, were critical to Ukraine's economy, while also being closely tied to Russian markets. These dependencies created a scenario in which economic leverage was inseparable from military and political calculations. Each side understood that control over energy resources and industrial capacity would affect both domestic stability and international bargaining power. By 2022, these tensions erupted into a full-scale conflict. Military buildups, strategic positioning, and political announcements created an environment where diplomacy failed to prevent escalation. The invasion was preceded by months of warning signs, troop movements, and international negotiations, yet the fundamental disagreements over sovereignty, borders, and security guarantees proved insurmountable. Both sides framed the conflict in terms of defense, security, and survival, while international observers assessed the broader geopolitical implications. The war has had profound humanitarian impacts. Millions of people have been displaced, seeking safety within Ukraine or abroad. Families have been separated, children have experienced trauma, and daily life has been disrupted in towns and cities across contested regions. Despite these challenges, communities have shown resilience, organizing support networks, shelters, and humanitarian aid to assist those affected. These human stories underscore that conflict is not just about strategy or borders, it is about real people, lives interrupted, and hope tested under extreme conditions. Cultural identity plays a crucial role in understanding the conflict. Language, history, and regional traditions influence perceptions of legitimacy, belonging, and allegiance. In Ukraine, the preservation of language, cultural heritage, and national identity is deeply intertwined with political independence. In Russia, historical narratives emphasize security, influence, and the protection of Russian-speaking populations. The clash of these identities is not a modern invention but a continuation of centuries-long dynamics, where history, culture, and politics intersect to shape contemporary realities. The global response has been significant. Sanctions, diplomatic measures, and international statements reflect the concern of the wider world. Countries have had to balance economic interests, alliances, and ethical considerations when addressing the conflict. The war has reshaped alliances, influenced energy markets, and prompted discussions on the role of international law, sovereignty, and human rights. It has also highlighted the complexities of intervention, neutrality, and the global responsibilities of states when regional conflicts escalate. Amid the strategy, diplomacy, and humanitarian crises, the psychological dimension cannot be ignored. Fear, uncertainty, and hope interact in the minds of both leaders and citizens. Decisions are influenced not only by material considerations but by perceptions of legitimacy, historical pride, and the desire to secure a future that aligns with national values. The emotional undercurrents of identity, loyalty, and survival shape choices on both sides, influencing everything from military strategy to public messaging. As we step back from the headlines and examine the deeper story, it becomes clear that the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is far more than a military struggle. It is a convergence of history, identity, and human aspiration, where centuries of shared and contested experiences shape the present. Every decision, every protest, every negotiation reflects not only political strategy but the hopes, fears, and resilience of millions of people living through uncertain times. Understanding these layers helps us see beyond the immediate conflict and recognize the profound human, cultural, and geopolitical forces at play. While the war continues to unfold, the lessons are universal. Sovereignty, national identity, and the desire for self-determination are powerful motivators for any society. At the same time, the consequences of conflict remind us of the importance of diplomacy, empathy, and international cooperation. Behind every statistic and news report are families navigating disruption, communities seeking safety, and ordinary people striving to maintain their dignity and hope. Their courage and resilience serve as a reminder that humanity persists even in the darkest circumstances. Reflecting on this conflict, we are invited to consider the value of understanding history, the importance of dialogue, and the enduring impact of choices made by leaders and citizens alike. In the end, knowledge and awareness empower us to view global events with clarity, compassion, and insight. The story of Russia and Ukraine is still being written, but by learning its real reasons and human dimensions, we can better appreciate the intricate web of history, politics, and humanity that shapes our world. May this understanding inspire curiosity, empathy, and a commitment to peace in whatever ways we can influence. Because beyond borders and headlines, it is the shared human experience that reminds us of our collective responsibility and our capacity for hope, even amid conflict.